Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host, Kevin David Kridner. So before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. We believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We aren't here to win arguments, we're here to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally and we follow where authenticity leads us. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, sometimes I feel like we had a conversation with the podcast team, ourselves and Haley, about our respective roles and what we contribute. There are times when I feel like I'm kind of the journalist or the newscaster or the reporter, and so first I scout out the crazy ideas, I toss them in your lap, and then I go interrogate you on your you know adventures into the rabbit hole. Let's say. Um, this time there's a topic that you've been circling around, um, starting to circle around in a new way over the past couple weeks, and I want to open this conversation before we get into that. Um, I want to open up this conversation with an observation that I made. It's been a little while back, but last year I was journaling around some content, and I made this observation, and I can't recall the exact wording, but effectively what I said was that there's truth that's gained by observation, there's truth that's gained by experience. But when you and there's insight that you gain when you're working in one field and you transfer it to another field. You're working in education, you apply it to finance, or parenting and you apply it to leadership or whatever. Like that's but there's a deeper level of insight to be gained by studying physics, um, and the world that we live in. And I find that what is reflected in the nature of the world in one place is often reflected in the nature of the world in other places.
Mm,
And um, and I've experienced that. I've been around people who've written entire books and done an entire series of trainings around that idea, where it's basically like, let's go find the deep fundamental truths of physics of the world, and
mm.
let's go. How does this apply to day-to-day life? How does this apply to how we do business, how we do relationships, how we do um, how we health, fill in the blank. One simple example for that is that um, when you look at a flame, and it looks like a flame doesn't have a pattern. And for many years, they struggled with how to render flames in video games. How do you render mountains and make them be realistic?
Right.
And that changed once they understood the mathematical nature of fractals.
Hmm.
And fractals are simply formulas that are repeating infinitely. And the more you zoom in, the more you get the same. And once they understood that, they actually had math for a pattern that looked random on the surface. And that's actually what led to the first realistic renderings of mountains and flames on computer games.
Right.
Um, the fractal nature actually applies to other things too, like forests. There's a correlation between individual trees and the layout of the forest itself. Um, and that's just one thing around the fractal nature of just around the concept of fractals and that side of
Yeah.
math. It's an incredibly geeky thing. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Which I'm obsessed with.
which you're obsessed with, which is
And my math classes are probably exhausted hearing about. I'll come in like, what about this? Have you seen this?
like, this is so cool.
I had them do an entire exercise on Fibonacci sequences and the golden ratio, and they had to recognize it in the world and find something. And one of the kids took a picture of her cat when the cat yawns because she noticed this pattern, like how the cat's face looks when it yawns. And she found the golden ratio within the framing of the cat's face. I was like, this is brilliant.
That's
And she was
awesome.
like embarrassed to show it. She was like, no, 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 no. Like I just want you to see it. And I like, so I was like, this is brilliant. And of course, I showed everybody. I'm like, look at what she did.
There's posters to be for all the cat lovers, like picture of your cat yawning on the wall, and look, here's the golden ratio with math to prove it. Like,
Right, exactly.
that's awesome.
So good.
Uh, yeah. So this particular rabbit trail to dive down um, originated from you diving into a theory that I actually hadn't heard about, called the one electron theory of the universe. And how about we just start with the theory itself and like, yeah, what does the theory say about the world?
Right. So recognize in me talking about this, this is a complete novice reading experts interpreting what they're saying. So like just to say straight out, it's just curiosity. It is not some, MIT astrophysicist explaining this to you by any stretch of the imagination.
It's fair.
I'm overcoming a cold, and so I'll probably cough quite a bit. Um, so I saw this video, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is interviewing a physicist, a fairly famous physicist. And I'm not a huge fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson because quite often there's this level of arrogance around it that I'm just like, yeah. But he's asking this guy about the one electron theory of the universe. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to hear what this guy has to say. And in this interview, Neil deGrasse Tyson was stunned silent as this guy talked. So for me, I'm like, I man, I gotta watch the rest of the interview because he's actually silent. Like there must be something here. And so this guy started to talk about particles within the subatomic particles. So protons, neutrons, electrons, that kind of thing. And he focused specifically on electrons in this one. And he said, we now know that protons move backwards and forwards in time. So there's not a present tangible reality that you can hold. Like in the beginning, when we started to model what an atom looked like, we started with these very formulaic shells. Okay, so there's these shells of power, and there's valence electrons, and the particles, the neutrons and the protons go in the nucleus, and then the electrons swirl around it. And then as that's the initial understanding. Then as we went further, we go, no, they really don't do that. There's really a cloud, and we really actually don't catch their position until we observe them. So it's like they do this chaotic thing, and then all of a sudden we observe them and they're in a position. Like, okay, if that's not enough to melt your mind right there, like
Right.
you're over. And he makes this point. He goes, because that's the case, and they move backwards and forwards through time. He goes, what if the electrons that we know are existing inside us right now, and the electrons that are in that tree that's outside the window, what if it's the same electron just on a different journey within the space-time continuum? And I'm like, how is that even possible? Please explain. And he starts to talk about this thing, and he says, we're coming to see that the nature of reality is like a tapestry woven together, and each the tapestry that exists is antimatter. So we know that matter, if you've taken your eighth grade physical science class or your intro to physics class, matter is something that has mass and takes up space, which is pretty much everything. So that's what matter is. So antimatter, or the other side of the coin to that, is everything else. Well, everything else seems to be things that don't take up space and don't have mass. So that would be energy, essentially. So energy is the fabric, and then matter is woven into that. And so the way he described it was that all of these particles are all interconnected, And they're in this moving pattern, creating this tapestry. And what you're observing is simply just one aspect of that whole tapestry. And so you want to fix it in place. You want to say, we want to, just you. Not like you have some motivation to be like, I want to know. We want it to be fixed in a pattern. But in reality, what it is this dynamic tapestry that is beyond the comprehension of us as human beings, because we're members of that tapestry. And we want to understand what's around us. Yes, of course. But we get very arrogant in saying what I see from my perspective as this part of the tapestry is all that there is.
Right.
But in reality, what it is this functioning system that someone put in place that acts as this interconnected, woven tapestry. That's the best word I have for it as far as how my mind works. And so I'm looking at that, I'm going, okay. So when I hear Jesus say, the vine and the branch analogies that he uses, I'm the vine, you are the branches connected to me, life flows through you. Disconnected from me, then it doesn't. And what I started to see is that the connected to him is being part of that tapestry that the entirety of creation is. And disconnected is a part of that tapestry trying to separate itself from the tapestry. So it brought up images very like the Silmarillion. When Tolkien wrote his origin story for Middle Earth, he had this amazing conception of there was uh, this orchestra that was playing, and in the orchestra it was harmonious and it fit together and it was beautiful and creation flowed from that. And then there's one part within that orchestra that insists on playing their own way, and it brings chaos to the tapestry. Or like in Lewis, in the Magician's Nephew, the first book in the Narnia series, like Diggory and what's the girl's name? Is it Polly? His friend? I think it's Polly. They go into this wormhole, and they end up in this another world, and it's the world before creation. And you see Aslan walking through creation singing, and it's bringing about all of the creation. And yet there's this element within that new world that has followed Diggory and Polly into the new world, the White Witch essentially. And she's working against this creative nature. And I started to go, wow, this makes a lot of sense as far as the nature of reality. Like, if we are all connected in this big tapestry in this way, and we're all working together, then this existence works as it should. It's harmonious. And all of us are benefiting from this interrelatedness. But then what the enemy of the story does, whether it's in the Silmarillion or it's in the Magician's Nephew or it's in the Garden of Eden story, is bring chaos, subjective reality into the story. So if it's the snake in the garden, bring subjective reality into it. Did God really say? How could it be wrong for? And the rabbis say that before the fall, there was only true and false. There was only union. And then anything that was apart from union was false. And he goes, as soon as that choice was made, as soon as that enemy figure brought subjective reality into it, then it became right and wrong, true and false, healthy and unhealthy. It became this dualistic understanding of the world. And there really is no dualistic understanding of the world. There is no separation. Every choice affects every other factor within that tapestry. And we have to recognize that we weren't designed for it. Separation is not even possible. And so when I watched this video and I started to think about it, what I'm starting to see is like the real power is in the belief that there is that separation is possible, but it's not possible. Now you can bring disorder into the system, of course, by not acting in union with the tapestry, of course. But that doesn't mean you're separated. That means you're a aberrant figure within the tapestry. So those are where my thoughts went from watching the video.
Well, I mean, there's only like zero or 100 questions here or observations. I mean, I think when you hear this, the idea that there is no separation, then the immediate thought is like, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Is there no sin? Does that not exist? Is that not a reality? But what you're saying is that, I mean, if you want to look at that, let me see if I can pull these thoughts, all these thoughts together. First of all, just an observation that there's a lot of these thoughts and ideas that are not new or novel thoughts. That this is a
No.
lot of this line of thinking is a very orthodox perspective in Christianity.
Going back thousands and thousands of years.
Correct, and it's very foreign to the Western line of thought,
Yeah, to our conception of reality.
to our conception of reality. But fundamentally, there's this sense in which um, when you try to distance yourself, you try to isolate yourself. There, the fact of the matter is that your attempt to do so has an impact on the people around you. Um, and the lie that we believe, and you fill in anything. It's like cutting somebody off in traffic, the unkind word, having an affair, indulging in an addiction of some kind, porn, whatever the thing is, stealing, whatever, like dishonesty, anything. The lie often starts with, I can do this. This only benefits me, doesn't hurt anybody.
Hmm.
I'm in the clear.
Hmm.
And we've had this conversation around freedom. It's like freedom, really, we do have freedom of choice, but not freedom of consequence. And so because separation doesn't exist, you can make that choice, but you can't make that choice because we're interwoven. You can't make that choice without having a ripple impact on the world around you. And
Right.
we've also had conversations around this, how far that ripple impact goes.
Hmm.
I've sometimes, rightly or wrongly, complained to my wife about people fairly distant from me who won't clean up their mess, and like their mess comes rippling all the way down to me, and I end up carrying the brunt of it in some way.
Right.
And realistically, this is also grace. Should be in a less
Right.
grouchy frame of mind. Um,
Right. Well, you
um,
think about it like the analogy that made a lot of sense to me is like, let's take a sock. You have a sock and you buy a new pair of socks. It's great. And you wear them and then you throw them in the washer and you have the fabric softener. And like when you wear it, the threads stretch out. Okay, so you wore it for the whole day and it starts to stretch out, misformed. You put it in the wash, you got some fabric softener, it's realigning those threads. Okay, so the weave is getting tighter as you do it. Like you put your jeans in the washer and you've worn them a few times, they're kind of stretched out, kind of thing. You put them in the washer, now you put them back on, they're tight again, kind of thing in the dryer. So like you have that sock and you wear it for years and years and years, and eventually the elasticity from the tension just causes it to spread out, spread out, spread out, spread out. There's this disconnection that happens, and then eventually it's not a sock anymore. You put it on and it slips down around your ankle, and like it just doesn't work anymore. And I think that's a very good analogy for what it's like to be a human being. Like you're the sock, or the nature of reality is the sock, and we're putting it on and we're wearing it and we're stretching it out, and there's all these pressure points within it. And without that bringing it back together, without that grace, without that understanding, without knowing and being known, then that sock just quits and it ceases to function as a sock.
which is why businesses and civilizations and marriages and relationships don't fail overnight. Like it's
Right.
it's actually the quiet pressures are often the biggest threats. The quiet pressures
Over
are seen over
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so yeah, you have your flare-ups, somebody, me, makes this decision within the fabric and says, "No, I want it to be this way." In this vacuum idea that we all have in our minds, and let's be really clear, we all have this. We all do it. We all make these decisions that are selfish, are I need this, I have to have this. And we do it, and maybe there's an effect and maybe there isn't. But over time, that choice ripples outwards, and we may not see the effect from it for years. We may see it immediately. But any separation from the nature of reality, from union, there will be a price to be paid. It will happen. It's just it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so you're right in the sense of the choices that I make, whether it's I flip somebody off on the freeway, or I say a harsh word to this person, or I take my pain of separation and I numb it via some source. That's a very self-indulgent act, which is separation. That's separating the vine from the branch. And there is a price to be paid for that.
I mean, well, just an interesting observation. I have friends who are fairly deep in a fairly patriarchal view of the world, where it's like, I mean, this comes to a non-union perspective of Christ as the head and man as the head of the woman, and so some of these individuals are making decisions that really end up costing their family a significant amount, and whether it's the right decision or not is maybe not the point. The point is that there's this denial. The idea is, the fundamental idea, if you want to break it down, is that I can make this decision, and because God's telling me to do this, it will be okay. Um, and fundamentally, there is a built-in denial of union. There's a belief in separation, that
Mhm.
other people can exist with their feelings and their life situations, and they'll basically be unaffected. And I mean, we all have. I'm mostly processing out loud here. I'm not trying to um, I'm not trying to cast anybody in a negative light in that. I have my own patterns of that, where it's like, um, I mean, there's any for myself personally, it's like, well, the business needs me to do this. This client needs me to do this. Um,
Mhm.
I, for my own self care, need to do this, or you, for your own self care, needs to do this. I'm going to pretend like I'm not affected. Um,
Right.
it can happen on any side of the equation, but unless there's a dialogue and a healthy negotiation around how we can thrive and coexist in this tapestry, um, to your point, even even in situations where separation, where other people are believing in the live separation, and you need to reposition yourself, reorient yourself in the world in relation to them,
Right.
create distance in the relationship, other things like that. That comes at a price. There's a
Hmm.
cost to doing that, and I think many times we're much more logical and accounting driven in these types of situations, where it's only when the cost of staying exceeds the cost of leaving that we make the difficult decision to leave. Um,
Right.
and so there's a um, to your point of the price needing to be paid.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend last night and he was kind of struggling. He's got a 5-year old and she's in kindergarten and they had a conference with the teacher and the teacher said, it might not be a bad idea to have her repeat kindergarten, which is not a tremendously odd thing. It happens. And his initial thought is, I failed. Like her reading isn't coming along like they had hoped or whatever. And I didn't sit down and read with her. I didn't take enough time with her. Da, da, da. And he was kind of going down this rabbit hole. I was like, wait a second. How did you make this thing with your daughter about you? And we have that kind of relationship. We call each other out quite often. And I go, what if it's strictly just developmental? What if she's just not ready on that level? I see it all the time in math. I see kids that they're, ninth graders, eighth graders, whatever, and they're not doing well in algebra, and the parents are freaking out because they have this urgency about where they need to be. I was like, wait a second. What if they're just not developmentally ready for that yet? And there's no right or wrong about it, but we're trying to force a square peg through a round hole here. What if we just gave them a little bit of time? What if she did repeat kindergarten and she's more developmentally ready for it the next time around? What does that matter at the end of the day? What does it matter if she graduates kindergarten as a 5-year-old or as a 6-year-old? Doesn't matter. And his wife asked the 5-year-old, "What do you think about maybe going again?" And she goes, "That would be awesome because my next door neighbor is going to go into that class next year and I could be with her and I could help her." And da, da, da. And so they're like shocked that their little girl is just like, "That sounds like a great plan." I mean, she's 5, obviously, so it's in
Right.
5-year-old language. I was like, maybe she's right.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't as big a deal.
You look at the apologies in advance for taking a mathematical perspective here, but let's say let's weigh out the two paths. Path number one, send her ahead. First grade's a struggle, just not quite developmentally ready. All right, 2 years of struggling. Let's move on to second grade. Second grade, also a struggle. Ah, okay, but we made it through third grade. Well, this is really becoming intolerable. Now let's go ahead and repeat third grade. So we have 3 years, difficult years for four actually, um, that we're reinforcing that school is hard. You're not going to succeed, and there is an implicit message. You can counter this for sure, but there's an implicit message that you don't measure up at that point, and it's been
Oh
baked
yeah.
in. And
Oh
so
yeah.
look at the imprint of those experiences versus at some point, somewhere along the line, somebody will be there's I heard there's a spiritual mentor, advisor, business, public speaker. I don't know what he is. He was telling the story about how he flunked kindergarten, and it's kind of his shtick in his thing. So it might be a joke later on. It might be a joke to somebody else later on. Other people might not know how to take it, but having that experience of being able to say no when I'm not developmentally ready, I get a mulligan. I can try again.
Yeah.
Um, I can win by
Yeah.
whatever standard.
Yeah. And for me, like math historically was like a really difficult topic. Struggled through it. I only passed geometry because my football coach was the teacher. Like, we'll just put it out on the table. Like, made it up to algebra 2, like, barely survived that kind of thing. And so I had this baked in idea that, like, I'm just not good at it. It's not for me. And so that was baked in. But as I start to look at it, like, I graduated high school when I was 17. So I was super young. I didn't turn 18 until the summer after I graduated. And so, like, was I developmentally ready for these concepts? Was I pushed forward? And to nobody's fault, just it was, the system about how you progress. Like, was I ready for it? And I'm like, no. And when I started teaching, the school that I started teaching at, small private Christian school, they needed a math teacher. She's like, oh, you're going to be teaching math. I'm like, oh, no. Oh, no. And it was a job. And I was like, well, I just need to sit down with this textbook and go through it. And just sat down with a basic textbook, pre-algebra, sixth grade math, that kind of thing. And I was like reading through it. I was like, oh, this stuff makes sense to me. And then went on to the next book. algebra. Oh, this stuff makes sense to me. And I just kept going all the way through calculus. And as I built that, I was like, oh, there was something else going on here. Like, I can understand this. I'm not bad at it. It was just developmentally, it wasn't at the right time.
Right.
And now I can understand, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And I've steeped myself in that. And it was just a developmental issue. What if in that fabric, not just in math, but in life in general, you have pieces that are developing within that pattern, within that fabric, and they're developing and they're developing and they're developing and they're developing. But another piece of that pattern looks at that piece and goes, oh, you're not pulling your weight. You're not developed, and I need you to be developed now. And so the pressure comes on, and then you start to feel the separation, and the threads start to separate from each other. Like, what if that's a part of reality? Not just in a learning place, but in a social and a spiritual and an emotional and a psychological place. That maybe that's one way the life separation comes through is you are not as you should be. Well, maybe you're right. And maybe I hear that message a lot. You're not as you should be. And maybe as part of that tapestry, I start to shrink away because I'm not as I should be.
Yeah. There's this very interesting dynamic between each person should carry their own burden and we should carry each other's burdens. And that's not always very clear where that lies because
Mhm.
I've experienced places where I'm like in my head I have the capability of doing this, but I'm for whatever reason so expended that I find it incredibly difficult. So rationally, it seems like yes, I should. You do have people who, um, and I'm very curious to hear from your experience. You do have people who make some kind of choice intentionally. It seems not to carry their own weight, not to contribute within their capacity. Um, Sometimes it's influenced by just a series um, of things that influence them in that direction. I mean, it usually is. That sounds kind of silly to say, um, but this very idea of an interwoven fabric, like that's the idea of the church. Um, it's there's one of the fascinating things to me that we see in the writings of Paul to the churches is that he's not addressing threads. He's addressing the
Mhm.
sock, to borrow your analogy,
Right. The
and
fabric.
the fabric.
Yeah.
And it's only as we participate in the fabric, being the fabric, being part of the fabric in church, in life, in society, in the world. And that is.
Yeah.
I don't know how to finish my sentence. That's it. Like
Well,
that's all.
you look at John, and John's, references of around love, especially in his letters, first, second, third John. Like the nature of reality is love. Beloved, love one another. It's like here's how you will know that you are or you're followers of Jesus is how you love one another. It's all about that. It's all about the fabric. And the one who's pulling away from the fabric does so for safety or protection or whatever distance they need. And in reality, pulling away from the fabric actually intensifies the pain that you're already feeling. The movement is forward. The movement is together. The movement is towards, not away.
Yeah.
Like look at your life. Look at our lives. Can you say that a movement away, a movement towards separation has ever benefited you long term?
No.
Now there's certain situations where there needs to be distance for time, of course. This thread is rubbing this thread the wrong way. Of course, there needs to be distance for time. But when we start to imagine that being eternal distance, like I see a lot within, and it's popping up a lot within pop culture and pop psychology and things you'll see on social media and videos and that kind of stuff about cutting your parents off. There's a big conversation about cutting your parents off. And there's for and against and the each side. But the reality of it is there a time where it's beneficial and wise to take space? Yes, of course there is. In all human relationships, that is a beneficial time. But if you get in your mind that that's a eternal reality, that I'm taking space forever, I'm cutting off, that's the fabric separating, but you can only separate so much. We're all connected. There's ties there. Think about this student whose parents are divorced, mom's remarried, she lives with mom, but she spends weekends with dad, and she doesn't have to, but she wants to. And in that situation, the dad, I haven't witnessed this myself, but as it's translated from the people involved, can be very demeaning, very shaming, very uh, not healthy for her.
Yeah.
And sitting down with the mom, she's thinking about, well, why does she keep wanting to go back? Well, because we're part of this fabric. We're connected. It's not her necessarily wanting to go back. It's almost like the inevitable pull back,
Right.
the expansion and the contraction. And so is there expansion needed at certain points? Yes, of course it is. Let emotions cool down, let people think, let process, give God space to work, however you want to talk about it. But is it with the reality that eventually that'll come back together? That's the nature of reality. If you say God is always about reconciliation, redemption, restoration, we're not saying something simply about the nature of God. We're saying something about the nature of reality. The fabric is the fabric. It's woven together. There's no denying that reality. So inevitably, that those two threads that created the third thread, they're all connected eternally. And so the nature of reconciliation, redemption, restoration is to bring it back together. That's just the nature of reality. And so this whole idea of cutting people off and shunning them and all that kind of stuff for a time, certainly. And Paul even talks about like Paul says like hand them over to Satan, kind of thing. The reality is allow them to live in their isolation and allow God to do the work in that isolation that needs to be done to bring it back together, to restore order within creation.
Right.
Maybe that's absolutely necessary. But if I live in a reality that isn't necessary, what kind of pain am I speaking throughout the system?
So what I hear you saying is that there's this acknowledgement varied by situation. Well, what you're advocating for, maybe said differently, is a very organic approach.
Hmm?
There's a sense in which there's this drive towards connection,
Hmm?
towards being part of the fabric, and because of something somebody else is experiencing that
Hmm.
they're not participating in it, we can't participate in it well, and so we withdraw to create space for ourselves. Um, and in some cases, this um, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me in terms of I've wondered sometimes for myself, why is there this returning to relationships that aren't healthy, that
Hmm.
don't reciprocate, that don't it makes sense that there's a that nature itself is calling people to be part
Yeah,
of the fabric.
right.
Um,
Nature is, like to use biblical language, nature is groaning for the revelation of the sons of God, those who live in the union. Like there's this groaning that's happening, waiting, longing for us to recognize that we're all part of the same fabric. And so, like,
so
to say there's this drive or this desire, whatever, within us for reconciliation and redemption is almost too, it's almost too reductionistic. Lays it down to the individual. Like, this is an individual drive. I
right.
want this. No, this is the nature of reality. And in
Reality is
resisting
calling
that,
people to.
yeah, and resisting that reality is resisting the idea that gravity is something. I can stand up on top of my roof with my paper mache wings and I can jump off and I can resist gravity for a time, but that's a very short period of time. It's going to bring me back down to the ground.
But isn't it possible though that people will violently resist gravity for their entire lifetime?
Oh, yeah.
And so much of how we navigate this ends up with an acknowledgement that somebody is resisting gravity, a surrender to the possibility that they might stop resisting gravity, and honesty that this pull is so strong, um, and 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 what they're getting through resistance may also be so strong that it might lead to misrepresentation.
Mhm.
Um,
What
and
do we
so
call that? How would you label that resistance to gravity for a lifetime? Like, is that an eternal reality? Like that resistance to gravity for a lifetime, which we all recognize, we've seen, it's happened in our
yeah,
world.
yeah.
What would we call that reality?
I mean, that's the very definition we. That's hell. Like that's by very definition. I
Hell. That's by very definition what hell is. Resisting gravity for, and we could say a lifetime, but that's too reductionistic because that's an ethos. That's a lens you see the world through. So that becomes an eternal reality.
yeah
You want separation, you get it. And that's why C.S. Lewis's description in The Great Divorce always made so much sense to me. Like his vision of hell, like there's this way station that everybody enters into, and there's this town, but what happens is you can only live there so long in close proximity to others. Then you have to spread out and spread out and spread out and spread out because I'm resisting the fabric. I'm resisting reality because it's too painful for me to be in close proximity. Maybe because I've been hurt, maybe because it hasn't gone well for me, a thousand and one different reasons why. But that resisting gravity for a lifetime turns into an eternal experience. I'm going to separate myself from the fabric, and you get to choose that. Now, there's something there about this life and then after. Do you cease to become part of the fabric when you live in that place where you're distancing from it? At some point, does that thread get clipped? I don't know. I don't know. C.S.
yeah
Lewis seems to suggest not, because you can travel back and forth. You can choose. But if you choose that, then you live in this existence really separated. But is it a disconnection from the fabric? I don't know.
These are questions that are far beyond my pay grade.
Me too. Me
I've
too.
heard I've heard theologians argue that because mention oh man, I can't even I can only remember the concept. I know it comes out of Revelations and I can't name the passage, but so apologies for that. But the idea that the the lake of fire is visible from heaven to serve as a reminder of the consequences of separation. Um, so, I mean, there's so many different theories, and um,
Right.
that's a whole that's a whole
Yeah. Well, like, and it's so reductionistic. Like you go on church websites and you look at their theology, they have their statement of purpose or theology or whatever, and then somewhere at the end it's going to say, people who don't accept this, I'm paraphrasing, will spend eternity in physical torment. It's so reductionistic to suggest that it's physical torment. What if it's the torment of resisting gravity for a lifetime and the emotional, psychological, and spiritual weight of that?
that's far worse than physical torment
To me, yeah.
to me. Yeah.
I mean, the physical stuff, broken legs, stitches, all that kind of stuff. No big deal. Like that
Okay, being
heals.
being eaten by worms for a lifetime seems pretty atrocious. Or eternity.
But living in the reality of choosing separation, of rejecting gravity for an eternity, that is hell. That is horrible. I mean, you could choose connection. You could choose love. You could choose knowing and being known, but you can't. To you, that seems like an impossible choice. Okay? Love allows you to make that choice.
There's another dimension to this as well, which is the love by very definition is participatory. It's you have to have it's bidirectional, and there's there's one kind of torment that comes from intentionally closing yourself off from the world. There's a different kind of torment that comes from intentionally maintaining the posture of love to the best of your ability and having it be denied.
Right. The
And
the 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 icon there, the archetype is Jesus.
you know,
He chooses to live in this union, in this love, in this state, and he's very lonely. He's very lonely. I mean, he has this connection with his father, and that sustains him. But if you read it, he's very lonely because people don't understand. They don't get it. So there could be the isolation, the solitude and the silence that he chooses quite often. I need to go spend time with my father. He goes away, and spends time with God, just him and God. And so there's a silence and solitude. So there's isolation in that sense, and there's isolation by human choice of this is too painful. So
right.
which one is it? Which one is it? You look at somebody who has separated themselves within your world, whether it's your family or your friend group or your work or whatever. Is that a personal choice? Is that running away from the pain? Or is that engaging in the pain with the Father? Which one is it?
Yeah.
And how do we know?
And how do we know? Well, and maybe one of the simplest ways to know is where do they go in that isolation?
Mhm.
Do they run to the Father? And if that's where we run to, um, maybe it's at least a clue that if nothing else, if if it is not, if nothing else, running to the Father gives him the opportunity through union to tease those threads apart, to reorient our lives such that our motives of the heart become are refined in whatever capacity.
Yeah. What if, in Isaiah, there's the imagery that Isaiah uses about being in the potter's shed, right? And seeing the broken pots, and it's just like, what are we going to do with this? And he reintegrates them into this pot, this beautiful pot, in a very, Japanese art of kintsugi. Like I'm reorienting this porcelain vase, bowl, whatever it is, with gold in the seams. Like very beautiful, right? What if we see him as a weaver and we bring him our sock in this silence and solitude, and you're like, there's thread clip, there's this one, like it's just a mess. And he sits down and he patiently starts to reweave that. And the scar doesn't go away. It's there. Like Jacob with the lamp. It doesn't go away. There's different thread that he uses and that kind of thing. But he restores what was broken. And not in just an individual level, but on a creation-wide level.
And there's a few more thoughts with this as well. I mean, we hear that how Scripture talks about how He is the one holding the world together.
Mhm.
And what if the one electron theory of the universe is an attempt, one scientific expression of the world somehow of that. I'm not trying to take a theological text and turn it into a scientific paper. I think those fall hopelessly short and are really quite
Right.
embarrassing. But what if that is the case? What if I can say experientially, like that's been the best decisions that I've made have come out of that, and it's never been changed as fast as I'd like. It's never been, probably rarely, the exact outcome I was hoping for, but it was always him mending the fabric and bringing the pieces together, and there was always depth that he brought that didn't exist before. Um, Grounding, belonging, a sense of home.
Right. What if what if all matter, everything that has mass and takes up space, us, the plants, all the way down to subatomic things, protons, neutrons, all that kind of stuff. And the antimatter, the energy. Like, what if he is that binding force that which I think is true? And this is very anecdotal. This isn't, again, it's not taking science and reducing it to this. It's trying to blend the two. And what if he is that force that binds everything together, the energy, if you will? And not to go too far off on a self-help frequency, Reiki kind of nonsense. But what if there is this binding force that holds everything together? And in science, we would call that the cohesive element. What if he is the cohesive element, like scripture says? That love is not just a characteristic he has, it's who he is. Pure knowing and being known, pure connection that can't be separated. What if And there's been a million and one different ways of looking at this story. The prodigal son story. What if it is a story of one trying to exist outside the fabric, separating and having that experience of what living outside the fabric looks like, and then comes back and just broken by living outside the fabric and goes like, I made a mess of my life. The father doesn't even allow him to explain. Oh, wow, you recognized that you're part of this fabric. Come back. So that's one aspect of it. But what if the other, the older son, you never threw a party for me and did all that kind of stuff. And he looks at me and goes, all I have has always been yours. You've always been part of this fabric. But with you're trying to earn and strive and achieve and become, you lost sight of the fact that you have always been part of this fabric. What if that's a different way? And a lot of people throughout the millennia have touched on a lot of aspects of that parable. What if that's one of the realities that's being taught there? You've never been separated. Everything I have has always been yours. You've always been connected. It was the lie that you felt like you had to earn your connection when it's always been there.
Yeah.
I had to be diligent. I had to work hard, and I put in all the hours, and da, da, da. And not saying that work ethic is an issue because it's a wonderful thing,
Mhm.
but you didn't need to do that. You were acting as if you were separated and you had to earn your integration.
Right.
I know that story well. Maybe if I'm smart enough, maybe if I'm capable enough, maybe if I earn it, then I'll be loved. And then getting angry when I'm not getting the love that I desired or thought that I should have. And the father looks at me and goes, you always had it. You were just too busy separating yourself to recognize that what I have has always been yours.
I was reading this morning. I mean, I think that's a really I mean, it's so that story is such an archetypical story of us, of like how do we live in our denial? I mean, there really is. There's the conformist and the rebel. I mean, like,
Right,
which one do you want to
right.
be?
Which I
And then
wonder why
finally,
Jesus tells that story. Hmm.
oh, and and then there's the son, which and sonship. There's a million and one people like talk about the in at least in some circles of Christianity, the over discussed topic of what is sonship. And but 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 there's simply the admission. Can we define sonship just as the definition that we are woven into the fabric and living from that space
Right,
and
right,
learning what that means in every area of life, really,
right.
because that's what it comes down to. I was reading this morning in Luke 7 about the ruler who, oh man, I'm bad at details because this in some of these details, because there's multiple of these stories that are fairly similar. But here's what stood out to me: all the people are like telling Jesus, like, "Hey, this guy, he's worthy. Like you should help this guy." So Jesus goes and he comes to this guy's house and he's like, "That." Goes to his house, starts going with the guy. Whatever. This guy throws up his hands. This is a really bad rendition. Just go read Luke 7 and you'll get the actual facts.
This is
Um,
the Matthias version of the
this is
story.
Matthias, the horrible. This is why everybody's grateful that I was not responsible for writing the Gospels. Um, the or the gatekeeper of perfect theology. I'm very grateful for people who help me in this regard. But the point being is Jesus then has a conversation with him, and he's like, "Whoa, wait, I'm not worthy because I'm a man under authority, and just say the word, and like that's all that's needed. Like don't even. I'm not even worthy that you come to my house. Like." And it's this very bizarre, like it just struck me this morning how bizarre that the people around Jesus specifically had to make a point to say, this guy's worthy. Like you should help him. And he's
Yeah.
like, actually, no, I'm not worthy.
Right. Yeah.
And
Don't help me.
I understand authority. And I'm like, I'm not like, and then Jesus turns around and says, oh, that's faith. Um,
Right.
and I think to frame that within the conversation that we're having here, there's this sense in which the people reveal this sense of otherness that that we are not integrated, we are not, but this person, he meets the standard by whatever definition that standard is. And the ruler recognized that no, there is, and this is also the Matthias version, but there is a cohesive element, and I am not that.
Mm.
And everything that I live and am experiencing is subject in some capacity to that cohesive element. It is subject's maybe not even the right term, but recognizing Jesus as that greater thing. It is he is the ultimate life in which we can participate. There's none greater. And that's what Jesus
Right.
looked at and said, ah, faith.
That's what I'm looking for. What did he see in that man? In that moment, what did he see?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but it seems to me like there had to be this undeniable recognition of humility because he didn't buy the people looked at him from a position of power and prestige, and he intentionally and maybe by some definition of reality, the people were not taking Jesus into account when they were self-referential, really,
Mm.
compared to us. Let's compare to
Right.
us. And and he made the choice to conform with the ultimate reality, which is humility, embracing reality, embracing truth. And he said, that's not actually true.
Right. Well, in that sense, this is fascinating to me. You hit something. In that sense, how would we define humility? In the sense of the fabric and the connectedness and the oneness, how do we define humility?
So my working definition of humility fundamentally comes down to embracing truth and reality as to the the maximum ability. I mean, in insofar as the extent of your knowledge. I mean, whatever. And in that case, if that's what humility is, then humility is accepting that there's a knowing and being known. There's a contribution. There's me carrying my weight. There's me helping to carry others' weight. There's other people leaning on me. I can lean on them. We're integrated. We're together. And I think humility, by very definition, has to like that's what it looks like to me. But I'm curious what your
Yeah.
thoughts are.
It seems to me what that guy is saying is, I'm not special. I'm not special. I'm just like these people. I've had authority. I know what it's like. I tell these people to go there, they go there. I tell these people to go there, they go there. Like I'm a human being. I'm not special. I've been, he's I think the story you're referencing is he's a Roman centurion, right?
Let me go. Let me go grab it. Yep, the Roman centurion. Um, and
Right.
and he actually started going towards the house. I was right, but when they weren't, um, no, he sent his servant. The people said, "Go," because this guy's worthy. When he wasn't far from the house, the centurion sent friends, did not go himself, and said, "Don't bother yourself. Like just say the word."
Mm,
Um, And that's when Jesus said, "Be made well." So these two actually never. I didn't realize this either until I took a second look at it. But they never met. They never interacted
Face to
face to
face.
face. They
Yeah.
never met face to face. In this, at least in this story. And so you have these two representatives,
Yeah.
or
You have this
these.
guy. Yeah. No, no, no. You have this guy who lives in this authority structure. Rome is very authority structured. There's a chain of command, and you do your job, and you do not, elevate or descend. Like you're in your position, you stay in your lane. And so it seems to me like he's operating out of this authority structure, but he sees how flimsy that authority structure actually is. And he's had enough time in this place to say, yeah, my whole life has been in this authority structure, and I see that it's creaking and it's collapsing and it's not real. But there's something real here in you.
Well, let's also talk about the crisis point that he was at. His Actually, this was a servant of his, which is also interesting. But a
Mhm,
servant of his who was sick to the point of death. So he
mhm.
has death staring him in his face. If there's not something to rattle your sense of control and power, then death itself. I mean,
Right,
there's what are you going to do? I mean, you're either going to completely deny the situation, or you're going to have to admit that the Roman power structure and the delegated authority that you have, by whatever measure, still comes up short.
right, right. And this isn't a family member. This isn't his child. This is a servant, which in that world, servants are dime a dozen. I can sell, I can get rid of, one dies, I replace them. Like it was more property. And yet this man is acting as if this person is not property to him. He's willing to humble himself before Jesus and say, hey, this person means so much to me, and I'm not worthy for you to come. I own servants. I'm not worthy for you to come into my house, but just say the word,
Also, note that he didn't say, "My servant isn't worthy for you to come all this way to heal,"
right?
because
I'm not worthy.
I'm not worthy. I mean, in that culture, he probably could have said that and gotten away with it. But that's not what he said. He said, "I'm not," yeah, to your point, what you said, "I'm not worthy."
Right. Wow. There seems to be this real recognition that I am a thread in this massive fabric. For you, the fabric, to come into my house and do this seems insane. I'm just a thread in the fabric. I'm not special.
Yeah.
But for you, the fabric itself, and this is a pagan. This is not a Jew. This is not one of his people. This is somebody outside the system recognizing I'm just a thread in this fabric. And the thread doesn't look at the fabric and say, come serve me.
Right. Jesus makes a very interesting statement after that. He turned to the crowd and he said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And I think that the danger of organized anything, organized religion, organized anything really, is that
Any system.
any system, any system, like maybe this perspective was only capable of arriving outside of the system. Like maybe this isn't possible because within the system you are the fabric. The system is the fabric, and
Right.
and
Oh, you just hit something hard. Oh, wow. Maybe this system is a false fabric. This is your reality. This is what you're woven into. Wow.
I don't disagree.
Jesus' statement right there. Not in all of Israel, in all of this fabric that you've created. I didn't create, you created. I haven't found faith like this.
Well, look at the level of wrestling that Paul had and Peter to say these Gentile people, like, maybe they can be part of the fabric. I mean, we're not, yeah, like, and you mean to say that being a Jew isn't the fabric? Like, this is not, that was, if you want to talk about paradigm altering,
Right. Well, the plan all along from the beginning is you will be my priestly people. At least as I read it. Could be wrong, but as I read it, you will be my priestly people who will tell others that they're part of this fabric. I need somebody to give this message to the
right?
world.
And instead, what ended up happening was, oh, we are the special chosen. Sorry, guys, on the outside.
Right. Yeah. What were
And
they?
when,
We hear that, right? The chosen people throughout. What were they chosen for? Were they chosen for this idealistic utopia separated from the rest of the world? If
can we just
that's the
go,
case, tell me about why the Old Testament is absolutely insistent continuously about taking care of the aliens, the widows, and the orphans.
which are those separated by very definition?
Why is the book of Ruth so powerful? This is a
Right.
pagan woman. She's from Moab, which has been entirely designed as this anti chosen people.
Why does Rahab, the prostitute, make her way into the lineage of Jesus? Like, scandalous. It by the system's definition. What if discipleship, and this touches a host of everything, evangelism, um, perhaps most predominantly, but protecting against tribalism. Like, if we truly believe that life at its most fundamental purpose, if you want to go find your purpose, like maybe this is the purpose driven life here, is participation in the life of Christ and knowing and being known, loving others, inviting them to be part of that fabric, not through coercion, but through participation as well. Participation through through life and in just, I think maybe there's people who would vehemently disagree with this, but this is increasingly the conclusion I'm moving towards, is that it's our participation of life with others is the means through which transformation happens for them to experience participation with Christ in some capacity. Um,
Right. What are that, the prodigal son story, going back to it, it's a series of stories about things that were lost and found, whether it's the coin or what's the other one?
uh,
The lady who's cleaning her house looking for the coin. Then there's
there's lost sheep. That's a fairly
lost
common one.
sheep. Yeah. I mean, it's all about lost things being found.
The treasure in the field.
Treasure in the field, yeah. The pearl of great price, like, all
Right.
of these things, the lost being found. And maybe it's my naive nature But as I go deeper into this stuff and as I start to talk about this stuff, I see violent reactions. What we're talking about here, and maybe it's me being naive, but like, why are you so angry?
Mhm.
Well, why? What makes you so angry about bringing people together, loving people, caring for everyone? What makes you so angry about that? Is it they're not part of the fabric? And I'm suggesting that they are, that all of us are. Why is that offensive?
But isn't the offense the fear and the lack of knowledge? Because let's face it, it's not easy, and it's not talked enough about. And I feel like I keep throughout our conversations pulling our conversation towards answering some of these questions. But how pragmatically, how do you live out life with people who are disrupting the fabric?
Right.
Because there is cost, and sometimes the cost of that disruption is other humans.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so you dare not. Oh, I gotta share this. This occurred to me over the weekend. I was thinking about life, perhaps not in my most optimistic mind, um, and and I started thinking about the word judgment and righteousness, and by and I started thinking about the cost that comes with separation, and there's a price to be paid. Isn't judgment and righteousness most fundamentally us stepping up to the plate and saying, I'm willing to pay the price for the cost of that separation?
Yeah. Yeah. There's something so deeply profound about what you just said. Isn't the cost us individually stepping up and saying, I'll pay the price for that separation? Isn't that what love does? Isn't that what Jesus did? I'll pay the price for separation. That brings new light to the statement, you don't take my life, I give it willingly.
I think it's very obvious through, I think it's obvious. That's just what a great way to start a statement. If you disagree, then obviously you're dumb. No, I'm just kidding. Um, the, the only means by which you can say that is if you have somebody to throw yourself onto and to surrender to in some capacity. Like it would be nice to say, it would be nice to let's look at Jesus. It would be nice to say Jesus' well never ran dry. Um, did it? Why did he disappear? Why did he pray to the point of sweating blood in the garden? Was that not him begging the Father for a morsel of supply to pay the the debt that separation, to pay the price tag, the payment that came due on separation?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can only make that statement that I'm giving my life when you come to the honest admission that they might take it.
I have no control over that. No control over that. There's these fascinating figures throughout history. The one that appears to mind in this moment is Joan of Arc, this young girl who caught a hold of something and just lived this way to her death, throwing herself on. I've read her journals and the accounts prior to being burned at the stake, throwing herself on God in a very similar way, tortured prayer. And there was something in her that was like, I'll pay the price. And we're not even looking at a political thing. It's not France and England and political intrigue and that kind of stuff. If you understand her in those terms, I think you're missing the whole point. There was something eternal about the fabric of reality that she was, for whatever reason, was a part of. She's willing to die for it. The disciples, all of them except for one, are killed. They're willing to die for it. They're willing to step into that space and take that judgment. I'll take the pain of separation. All except for one. They tried to kill John, it just didn't work, so they just exiled him.
Yeah.
There's this mystic, I forget who it was, maybe Saint Catherine or Saint Teresa, whatever it is. She says, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few. Only somebody so deep in that relationship with God is so intimate with him can make that statement.
Right. That is a very pointed yet compassionate statement.
Right.
Wow.
Can you imagine Jesus making a different statement in the garden? Isn't that essentially what he's saying? Father, if you could take this from me, please do. But at the end of the day, what you want, not what I want.
Yeah.
Is this what union looks like? Yeah, it does. That you love my creation, my people so much that you're willing to stand in that place and take the judgment for separation.
Yeah.
And even to his dying breath, he's developing relationship. The guy next to him, this guy doesn't deserve this. We deserve this. This guy doesn't deserve this. Today you'll be with me in paradise. In that eternal reality of the recognition that I'm part of a fabric and I can live fully from that union. Paradise. I'm no longer tormented with the illusion of separation. Man,
Yeah. A statement like that either comes from hallucination from pain or from a deeply embedded embrace of that as reality. There's,
right. Right.
right?
Well, this
Like,
is this is the idea, right? Like Jesus is a good moral teacher. No, he's either absolutely batshit crazy delusional, or he is who he says he is. There's no in between ground here. There's no good moral teacher.
imagine death by suffocation. and you use to choose the breath that will keep you alive to make a statement to share that with the person
Yeah.
who is being punished for something that he admits that he deserves.
Or or one of those last breaths to look at one of his closest friends and say, "Take care of my mom."
Yeah. Seems like the antithesis of self-preservation.
Right. Right. And in that sense, when he makes that statement, "Father, it is finished," what an exultation. What a deep sigh of relief. This is over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm coming back to you. What if all of
Well,
us could have that deep exultation at the in our last breath of like, Father, I'm coming back to you.
the one thing that jumped out earlier when you're talking about separation not existing, I think it's fascinating that God himself allows himself not to be separated to the point of sending his own son for the sake of for the sake of union.
Right.
If that's not if that's not a statement around priority and essence, I don't know what is.
Right.
Well, so to everybody listening, I get to read an early version of Kevin's writings on this, which are coming out on his Substack over the next, probably by the time you get it, they're going to be out. Kevin, I did have one little thing I wanted to pick on, which
Yes, please
launches this
do.
question. But we're almost out of time, Kevin. Shall we?
Yeah, dive in.
Okay. So here's a little question. You mentioned the concept of darkness and light shining on darkness.
Mhm.
There's a sense that I've had throughout the places throughout the world that are throughout experience that darkness is represents evil. And here's the question: what if darkness doesn't actually represent evil? What if darkness is simply the cover that makes evil easy to happen and that allows evil to continue happening? And what if light is simply the knowing and being known that gives evil pause for it to exist?
Mm, it's a great question. My initial response is, what if we've seen it all wrong? What if darkness is simply just incorrect perception and light is correct perception? So, in that sense of a veil that covers something, my incorrect perception of reality, that I'm separated, that I'm apart. And then the light comes in, this realization that, oh, wow, I am connected, not just here, but to everything. And that opens your eyes. What if that's all darkness is incorrect perception? I live in the darkness of my thoughts because I'm perceiving things incorrectly. I need to run and hide. I need to protect myself. I need to be away. I need to separate. No, you need to move closer in a very Jesus-esque way. Like you just said, him sending his son to say this message, he moved closer.
There's a sense in which, um, I mean, John talks about not being any sun because the Lamb of God is the light. There's a sense in which our context and perception of light is influenced by timing, time of day, perception, placement, location. It's all same thing, said different ways. Um, So if I think you're I'll just be a little grouchy because it doesn't perfectly fit any kind of analogy to physics. So that's I'm going to leave that as a maybe we'll even get into that next time because you dove into some of the theory around light and particles and waves and
Yeah,
more nuance around that
fascinating. And the law of observation.
and the law of observation. Um,
That things
but that
behave differently when observed.
yeah,
Talk about light
yeah,
and darkness.
about light and darkness. Um,
To observe
Experientially,
something, there has to be light.
in observation is in some sense the light. Um, yeah, experientially, I agree with your statement. You just got to spell it out because we're in a physics conversation. You just got to spell out the connection,
Right,
or it's
right.
not true. No, I'm just kidding. But, um,
And I want to say, like you've said it multiple times, I've said it multiple times. Like at the end here, I want to say, like, these are just curious thoughts around ideas that are just kind of swirling here. We are by no means experts. We're not saying come follow us. We're just having conversations about what is curious to us. And what has fascinated us in our conversations over the years has always been union, love, knowing and being known. What does that mean? How does that play out in our world? So these are curious conversations around these topics. These are not polemics. We're not issuing a papal bull here. We're saying this is a conversation, and if you want to be part of the conversation, you will be greeted with open arms. There's no right or wrong here. It's what if this is possible? What if this is possible? What if this is possible? We're just curious people asking questions. So none of this is trying to say, like, this is the nature of reality. What we're saying is, I've picked up on this thread, and this is really curious to me. This is really interesting. What do you think about this?
right. And I think in this there's this is the systems minded part of me speaking for sure, but there's this admission that or numerical. Let's look at math. You have two people with two experiences out of the billions of the world. Um, our perspective on what union and looks like would look very different if we had been if our experiences if through our experiences we had spent the majority of our time in Antarctica or Africa or East Asia or pick whatever or had we had different careers, different experiences, all of those types of things. And I think the challenge, all of us as humans crave certainty. We want a place to put for our feet to land, and
Yeah, of course.
it's very easy to cling to conclusions for the sake of that.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think that, and this is also probably also not clear that there are things that we talk about that land much deeper in our places of conviction than I think many of these explorations are really an attempt to follow curiosity and as much as we can. The peripherals of our curiosity are often the most uncertain, but they all seem to be leading us back to what we end up seeing as core perceptions of the reality of what life is actually like.
I I think we call the first four books of the New Testament the Gospels, which means good news. I see the center point that we keep negotiating, swirling around is good news. I'm curious about the good news. What is the good news?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we should keep swirling around. And we bring in terms like union and separation and and love and grace and mercy and compassion and hate and like all these things that come into this conversation. But the core conversation is what is the good news? We're curious about that.
Yep. We've you can say what is it that is it a Churchill quote that says that the truth is so important that it's often surrounded by a bodyguard of lies.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
I don't know if it's Churchill, but it sounds like him.
um, but then there's also I've also heard it said that we're predominantly shaped by forces that are bigger than we can see, and that most of our most of from whence we derive passion and purpose is by experience. I think one of the curious questions for me has been throughout the years, what actually is the gospel, and why do the people who say they are the defenders of the gospel, why are they so defensive about the gospel itself? And
Right.
that's at the core. And then I mean it's all of that. And then what does this look like pragmatically to live it out? Like what is it really
Right.
like? It's those to me are the questions that recurring curiosity. So yes, there's these tangential interests around the single electron theory of the universe, and I have other weird interests as well that I have, but at the core, that those all are I tend to view these as riddles, um, and lenses to look through, curious data points to sift through for clues and understanding, pointers to the truth. So
If if the good news like is truly good news, why does it need to be violently defended and affirmed? Violently physically, in some cases, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. That doesn't make sense to me.
well, maybe because it's not the fabric that's being defended; it's the false fabric. Maybe.
Well, you said it. I did. Now you're the disturber of the peace.
No, I'm the disturber of the peace. Thanks,
Yay,
Kevin.
we finally got to it.
All right, hi guys, wrap it up. Matthias, the guy who got thrown under the bus by his co-host Kevin, let it go down in history as he laughs gleefully on the other side of the camera.
Yes. I'm laughing because I'm so happy to not be alone. That's joy
Ah,
right there, buddy.
that's like David and his mighty man Robin Hood and his cohorts. Oh goodness. All right, well, folks, that's there you go. That's the deep dive into the single electron theory of the universe, and at least a deep dive. We'll see where this journey
Right.
leads.
Our deep
Um,
dive.
yeah, our deep dive. You should go listen to the video, see what you think, if you're curious.
Yeah. We'll
And
post it in the show notes.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Meanwhile, follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Substack. If you prefer reading over this, Substack is a great place to go. Subscribe on Spotify, and if you think we're worth listening to or laughing at, share us with your friends. And until next time,
Until next time.
thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank